looking to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching ASEAN in Focus on today's headlines. Invest in Asia's fastest rising star. This was how President Marcos Jr. pitched the country to Singaporean investors in a speech during the first ever International Philippine Economic Briefing at Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore. The Office of Civil Defense thanked the public for its participation in Thursday's third quarter National Simultaneous Earthquake Drill, which featured face-to-face exercises for the first time since the pandemic began in March 2020. In a city known for monstrous traffic, zombies are rising up in a scary bid to get more people to use public transport, and that is the hope of the light rapid transit operator in the Indonesian capital Jakarta, which has turned a train and station into a set of a bloody zombie apocalypse with real passengers invited to the show. And the Philippines was once again named as Asia's leading dive and beach destination by the 2022 World Travel Awards in Vietnam. Intramuros also reclaimed its title as Asia's leading tourist attraction. First in our news, the Philippines is keen on forging stronger ties with the Singaporean business community. President Marcos Jr. said, "Invest in Asia's fastest rising star." Now, that was how the president pitched the country to the Singaporean investors in a speech during the first ever International Philippine Economic Briefing at the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore. Let's take a look.
Because today we shine a spotlight on Asia's fastest rising star, the Philippines. The Philippines welcomes the next 6 years with optimism, grounded on a favorable investment policy environment, sound macroeconomic fundamentals, and a strong and decisive economic team. We are presently on a steady path to a strong recovery from the pandemic and a robust economic expansion. In the next few years, our economy is expected to outperform our regional peers. My administration is committed to establishing an even more competitive business climate conducive to high-value investments. More investments translate to higher economic activity, more jobs, and a better life for all Filipinos. We are implementing an 8-point socio-economic agenda that underscores the commitment through broad-based job creation, expansion of our digital infrastructure, and promotion of research and development across the country. This strategy will enable us to reduce poverty sharply and upgrade the country to upper middle income status. We will exercise fiscal prudence in the fulfillment of that agenda. To this end, we are pursuing the country's first ever medium-term fiscal framework, which will widen our fiscal space to allow for continued investments in public infrastructure and human capital development. We will expand our high investments in public infrastructure by leveraging our public-private partnerships mechanisms. We will improve interconnectivity through transportation development. We will fast-track the development of our railway systems, modernize our airports and seaports, and enhance our road infrastructure. As a critical driver of the economy, we will focus on agriculture as a strong driver for growth. An efficient and modern agriculture sector will ensure food security for all and reduce poverty incidence. We will also reinvigorate the tourism sector through massive investments in travel infrastructure, and the promotion of the Filipino brand around the world. We invite strategic investors from the international community to take part in the Philippines' economic resurgence. We will change the game by structural reforms that we have set in place to allow for wider participation in our industries. With the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE, and the economic liberalization measures, we have expanded the space for foreign investments in and joint venture opportunities for industry players employing cutting-edge technologies. The presentations of the economic team today will paint a clearer picture of what you can expect in the next 6 years. The Philippines welcomes your investments and looks forward to forging even stronger ties with the Singaporean business community.
The Philippine Economic Briefing in Singapore was conducted in cooperation with the Philippine Embassy Singapore and the Philippine Trade and Investment Center Singapore, together with partner banks, namely BofA Securities, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, SMBC, Nico, Standard Chartered Bank, and UBS. Singapore is the Philippines' top investor last year, with Singaporean companies maintaining big-ticket projects in telecommunications, infrastructure, startup and innovation, renewable energy, and healthcare. Now, securing additional foreign investments were among the priorities of Marcos in his state visit in Singapore, which was concluded Wednesday. During the trip, he also signed several memorandum of understanding, which strengthened Philippine-Singapore cooperation on personal data protection, counterterrorism, water collaboration, and the development of the new Clark City. Now, take a look. Press Secretary Beatrix Trixie Cruz Angeles also said an agreement between the Department of Migrant Workers and the Ministry of Health of Singapore for the deployment of additional Filipino healthcare workers was signed. The government of Singapore was pleased with the service of our healthcare workers, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, so they want to hire over 3,000 Filipino healthcare workers through a government-to-government arrangement, Angeles said in her Facebook post. Maintaining political and economic stability is among President Bongbong Marcos Jr.'s reasons in visiting Singapore. In his remarks during the state luncheon at the Astana in Singapore, the president acknowledged that the host country is a strong partner at the bilateral and regional levels. Again, let's listen in.
Our bilateral relations have grown from strength to strength over the years. And this should not be a surprise, because as Madam President has mentioned, we are partners of long standing. The official relationship between Singapore and the Philippines started in 1969. But the cultural, ethnic, and trade connections have gone back perhaps many millennia. As a strong partner at the bilateral and regional levels, the context of our larger ASEAN community, Singapore is certainly part of our journey. We see our future of the Philippines as having Singapore beside us, forging ahead to the future. Singapore, as part of our journey in maintaining political stability and economic prosperity in the region, we are one with you in proving to the world that the strength of a country is not in its size, but in the quality of the lives and the ties that it forges with the members of the community of nations, guided by the tenets of sovereign equality and independence. On a historical and a slightly personal note, my relations with Prime Minister Lee have special historic resonance. I remember very well that in the discussions, I was still a young boy, but always listening and trying to find out what was going on in my father's office. I remember listening to him
speaking on the telephone with then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, and they were talking about the formation of ASEAN. And as heads of their respective countries back then, they laid the groundwork for the ASEAN in 1967. What used to be a fledgling idea has now evolved into a dynamic and truly relevant ASEAN community. As a matter of fact, we can say that ASEAN has grown into the strongest, most viable political aggregation in our region. We are therefore optimistic that Philippine-Singapore relations, both bilaterally and within the ASEAN context, will continue to grow and become even stronger in the years ahead. I look forward to closer ties and stronger ties between our two countries. Our candid exchange of views, constructive discussions, and the governments that were signed this morning have given us renewed optimism for an even brighter future.
Now, he also vowed that his administration would make sure that the Philippines' cooperation with Singapore in various fields would benefit the citizens of the two countries. Singapore is a valued partner of the Philippines and a fellow ASEAN founding member. The Philippines and Singapore's bilateral relations have grown in several key areas, including trade and investment, security and defense cooperation, cultural exchanges, and people-to-people relations. The two countries' strong friendship was manifested when an orchid was named after Marcos and First Lady Liza Marcos during their visit to Singapore's National Botanical Garden on Wednesday. Singapore's developed economy opens more opportunities for over 200,000 Filipinos working and residing in the host country. In tonight's other news, the death toll from a fire that tore through a karaoke bar in southern Vietnam has now risen to 32. Reports said the blaze engulfed the second floor of the building on Tuesday night. It trapped customers and staff as dense smoke filled the staircase and then blocked the emergency exit. Many crowded onto a balcony to escape the flames, which grew quickly as they caught the wooden interior, while others were forced to jump from the building, according to state media. State media also reported that 8 people were found dead in the toilet. The initial cause of the fire was said to be an electrical short circuit, according to a report by Bindong authorities cited by state media. Witness Nguyen Sang, who lives near the karaoke bar, told the VN Express news site that when fire trucks arrived at the scene, a receptionist said there were 40 people still stuck inside. Sang said many people ran outside through the main entrance, but many others could not stand the heat and they jumped down, breaking their hands and their legs. Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh ordered a further inspection of high-risk venues, especially karaoke bars. The flooding and torrential rains in Bangalore, the capital the IT capital of India, has not only brought the IT corridor to a standstill. Migrant workers who live in shanties were forced to vacate their homes in the middle of the night when the water suddenly gushed inside their homes.
The people living here, actually, they're the ones who keep Bangalore clean. And they provide a very valuable service to all Bangaloreans. They recycle so much of waste, keep the entire city clean. But they live in such harsh conditions, which is very sad.
The southern metropolis of around 8.5 million people boomed in the 1990s with its myriad outsourcing and software companies now employing millions in the back office of the world. But the city's companies have complained that infrastructure development has not kept up, with perennial traffic jams and unplanned construction on the dried up beds of lakes, leading to frequent flooding even after moderate rainfall. The umbrella group for the IT sector, the Outer Ring Road Companies Association, advised employees to work from home, while many schools and colleges were shut. The supply of drinking water to more than 50 areas of the city was stopped for 2 days after a pumping station was inundated as more rain was forecast. The death toll from a strong earthquake that struck southwest China rose to 82, according to state media today, as rain and possible mudslides threatened the search for dozens of missing people. The magnitude 6.6 quake hit about 43 kilometers southeast of the city of Kangding in Sichuan province at a depth of 10 kilometers on Monday, according to the USGS, forcing thousands to be resettled into temporary camps. State broadcaster CCTV said that 46 people died in Ganzi Prefecture near the epicenter, while 36 deaths were reported in neighboring Yan City. More than 270 were injured, while the number of missing remained at 35, according to CCTV. The National Weather Service said moderate rain will continue in the affected earthquake area today and Friday, with some localized heavy rain showers. Since the post-earthquake geological conditions are inherently fragile and the impact of additional rainfall may lead to landslides and mudslides, according to the local area needs to beware of secondary disasters, and that is according to the China's Meteorological Administration. The Department of Foreign Affairs on Tuesday here in the Philippines announced that no Filipino was reported affected by the magnitude 6.6 earthquake that struck China's Sichuan province. In a message sent to reporters, DFA spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza said, based on initial info, there are 167 Filipinos in the area, but no reported Filipino was affected by this earthquake. Here in the country, the Office of Civil Defense thanked the public for its participation in today's third quarter National Simultaneous Earthquake Drill, or NSED, which featured face-to-face exercises for the first time since the pandemic began in March 2020. Stakeholders are encouraged to conduct drills simultaneously in support of the NSED while strictly observing minimum public health standards. The program started at 8 a.m. with a ceremonial pressing of the button taking place at the Masaya building in Legazpi City Village. A full-scale exercise was also conducted to test the response capabilities of the Makati government unit in the event of a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. Scenarios include community evacuation, activation of an incident command post, fire suppression, search and rescue in collapsed structures, response to mass casualty incidents, and high-angle rescue. OCD Administrator Undersecretary Raimundo Ferrer said these drills are vital in saving lives in the event of a strong earthquake. Blistering crop withering temperatures that also risk the health of agricultural workers could threaten swathes of global food production by 2045 as the world warms. An industry analysis warned today climate change is already stoking heat waves and other extreme weather events across the world, with hot spells from India to Europe this year expected to hit crop yields. Temperature spikes are causing mounting concern for health, particularly for those working outside in sweltering conditions, which is especially dangerous when humidity levels are high. The latest assessment by risk company Verisk Maplecroft brings those two threats together to calculate that heat stress already poses an extreme risk to agriculture in 20 countries, including agricultural giant India. By 2045, the list grows much longer. The top 20 at-risk countries in the coming decades include key Southeast Asian rice exporters Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam, according to the authors, noting that rice farmers in central Vietnam have already taken to working at night to avoid the high temperatures. In other news, a days-long search for the second man suspected of carrying out a stabbing spree in a remote Western Canadian Indigenous community ended with the 32-year-old dying after being taken into custody, according to police. Federal Police Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore told a news conference that Miles Anderson went into medical distress shortly after being arrested. Take a look.
Evening, our province is breathing a collective sigh of relief, as Miles Sanderson is no longer at large. I can confirm that he is no longer a threat and there is no risk to the public related to this investigation. Police officers surrounded the vehicle and through verbal identification confirmed the identity of the driver to be Miles Sanderson. He was arrested by police and taken into custody. A knife was located inside the vehicle. Shortly after his arrest, he went into medical distress. Nearby, EMS were called by police to attend the scene, and he was transported to a hospital in Saskatoon. He was pronounced deceased at the hospital. Again, I would like to offer my deepest condolences to the families and all those affected and impacted by these events. Our thoughts are with you, and I hope that now you will be able to start healing.
I reached out to the James Smith Cree Nation leadership earlier today, had a good conversation with the chiefs. I also spoke with Premier Moe of Saskatchewan to highlight that the federal government will be there with the resources necessary right now in this time of crisis, but also will continue to work as partners in the weeks, months, and years to come through grieving and healing.
Anderson and his brother, 32-year-old Damien, were wanted for the crimes which occurred at 13 different locations in two northern Saskatchewan communities, James Smith Cree Nation and the village of Weldon. Damien was found dead Monday at the James Smith Cree Nation. His injuries didn't appear to be self-inflicted, according to police at the time. Authorities said he likely had been killed by his older sibling, who remained a fugitive until his arrest near the town of Rosthern in Saskatchewan, about 100 kilometers west of where the stabbings occurred. The motive for the stabbings is not known and may never be now that both suspects are dead. Although COVID-19 and monkeypox cases are declining globally, World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus warned against complacency. Again, let's listen in. Tedros, you have the floor.
First, to the COVID-19 pandemic. The global decline in reported cases and deaths is continuing. This is very encouraging. But there is no guarantee these trends will persist. The most dangerous thing is to assume they will. The number of weekly reported deaths may have dropped by more than 80% since February. But even so, last week, one person died with COVID-19 every 44 seconds.
You have the floor.
You might be tired of hearing me say the pandemic is not over. But I will keep saying it until it is. This virus will not just fade away. Pandemics threaten every single person on Earth. So it's important that everyone can have their say on what this landmark international agreement looks like. To enable that to happen, WHO is holding public hearings to give as many people as possible the opportunity to have input into the negotiating process. We invite everyone everywhere to have their say.
These vaccines continue to work incredibly well against preventing severe disease and death. The vaccines that were developed on the ancestral strain, the original virus that was circulating, continue to work. So getting vaccinated, making sure you receive all of the doses that you have, remains critically important.
That's the prospect that mucosal vaccines bring. Not only an opportunity to reduce the severity of infection, but an opportunity to reduce onward transmission of the virus. And that may offer us a much stronger prospect for control of COVID in the long run. But that remains to be seen, because a lot of work needs to be done. We don't have access to that data yet, but we do look forward to that, and we encourage the kind of work that develops new innovative vaccines that allows us to go to the second and third generation of vaccines that we may need ultimately to deal with the end of COVID and to deal with future respiratory virus threats.
Now to monkeypox, where we're continuing to see a downward trend in Europe. While reported cases from the Americas also declined last week, it's harder to draw firm conclusions about the epidemic in that region. Some countries in the Americas continue to report increasing number of cases, and in some there is likely to be under-reporting due to stigma and discrimination, or a lack of information for those who need it most. But as I said earlier, a downward trend can be the most dangerous time if it opens the door to complacency.
In a city known for monstrous traffic, zombies are rising up in a scary bid to get more people to use public transport. And that is the hope of the light rapid transit operator in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta, which has turned a train and station into the set of a bloody zombie apocalypse. The real passengers invited to the show. Take a look.
This game is around 20 minutes. The ideal time is around 20 minutes. If and only if you are not panic. Most of the people usually panic at the first time of trouble. So our record is 1 minute because he just came in and came out, panicking himself and just give up.
The paid attraction, which the Super Cities light rail operator PT LRT Jakarta and event organizer Pandora Box launched last month, aims to promote the relatively new system and more generally encourage young people to take public transport. The twitching, growling actors are dressed in tattered clothes inside the blood-spattered carriage. A TV anchor, another actor, reports news about a made-up Pandora virus outbreak spreading around the city, turning humans into the walking dead. Now, soldiers armed with fake rifles are fighting the zombies and try to escort passengers to safety. But the reanimated corpses lurk, hidden, ready to emerge and terrorize. Now, this is called The Train to Apocalypse. The event is inspired by the 2016 South Korean horror film Train to Busan. We want to tell young people that taking public transport can be something cool too, according to Billy Jr., CEO of Pandora Box. Home to more than 30 million people, heavily polluted Jakarta has some of the world's most traffic congestion, and its uneven pavements mean it's not conducive to walking. Its light rapid transit system only began commercial operation in December of 2019, and transport analysis cautioned at the time that the new line and cheap prices alone would not cure the city's infatuation with private vehicles. Riding the train to apocalypse costs 60,000 to 70,000 rupiah, or $4 to $4.70 until the event ends on Sunday. The organizers promise the 20-minute ride doesn't disrupt the trips of regular LRT passengers. Even without participating, they can catch a glimpse of the horror show for free. Finally, in our news, the Philippines was once again named as Asia's leading dive and beach destination by the 2022 World Travel Awards, or WTA, in Vietnam on September 7. Intramuros also reclaimed its title as Asia's leading tourist attraction. Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco on Thursday welcomed the back-to-back win, saying it proves the beauty of the Philippines. WTA awarded the Philippines for the 6th time as the leading beach destination in Asia, besting in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam, and at the same time achieving Asia's leading dive destination title for 4 straight years since 2019, edging Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Frasco said the dive citation from WTA cemented the premise of the DOT in hosting the Philippine International Dive Expo, or FIDEX 2022, which is considered the country's largest platform to network and promote the dive industry. The Philippine Commission on Sports Scuba Diving, an attached agency of the DOT in charge of marine sports, has recently appropriated a budget of 9.53 million pesos for the first time by the national government for more intensified dive tourism promotion and development. Frasco said the Philippines is ready to receive tourists while continuing to promote the Filipino brand of hospitality. Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. As I always say, stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.